Hey y'all, welcome to the podcast. This is Blair Sinta, and this is Recording Drums with me, Blair Sinta. All right, today we're talking to Pete Korpela. Pete is the kind of young, now established, but I guess you could also say up-and-coming LA film percussionists. He has infiltrated the scene, which is not an easy thing to do. He's working with all the heaviest composers. His resume reads like this: The Lion King, Spider-Man Far From Home, Jumanji 3, Spies in Disguise, The Addams Family, Dr. Sleep, Ready Player One, Men in Black International, Christopher Robin, The Predator, Ferdinand, Lego Movie 2, Onward, Call of the Wild, Mandalorian, Star Trek Discovery, Lady and the Tramp, blah, blah, blah. All right, you get the idea. Pete's working. And he's doing some of this from home. And he worked through the pandemic, working from home. And Pete and I worked a little bit together with Josh Groban. That's how we met. Really great guy, incredibly knowledgeable in many different styles, ethnic percussion. He's got a lot of cool things to say. And the fact that, I always find it fascinating, percussionists working from home on film, because it's a totally different beast than recording drum kit for songs. It's just a different approach, sonically, miking, sonically capturing percussion. All right, so pretty cool interview with Pete. All right, so my class, Drum Recording Expert Spring Session is happening. It's starting April 19th. It's going to run for 6 weeks. It is a 2-hour class, one time a week. So you get 12 hours instruction, and we're going from top to bottom, from tuning drums, picking cymbals, to miking, different variations of how to mic, why to mic, where to mic. We're going to talk about getting big sounds in small rooms, which is a challenge for a lot of us home recording drummers. We're going to talk about EQ, compression, how to send files, how to deal with budgets, everything top to bottom. So starting April 19th, you can check it out on my website, all the details, questions that you have. I got a lot of testimonials from previous students who took the class. Went really well. So check it out on my website, blairsinta.com. And of course, all my courses are for sale: Snare Sound Bible, Improve Your Groove, and Introduction to Recording. All right, let's get to the show. Wait, that's a Mark Maron line.
Yeah, it's my converted studio room.
Okay.
So I basically build a room within a room.
Okay.
And then
in your house.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, unless an airplane or a helicopter or something like that flies over, I really don't have to do new takes.
Right.
So it's that quiet. Cool. I had a friend of mine who's built quite a few home studios in LA, who came by and I hired his help in. Although I did most of the work myself, he did come and give me extremely valuable consultation how to do it, right, and how not to do it. Because I'm sure all of us who have dealt with building a home studio, you start asking people, what did you do? How did you do it? Or you go online and it's an endless rabbit hole.
Right.
And what he was, the best advice that I got from him is like, don't float your floor, because I would have to cut in the concrete. And he's like, well, that might cause other problems later on, because it's LA.
Yeah.
Earth moves. And unless you're, playing loud bass or maybe kick drum or something, like for drum set, it might be one thing, but for percussion, it really it's not going to make that big of a difference. And
Yep.
And same thing with the ceiling. Is like you unless you really, really put a lot of money in reinforcement in it, you can't put too much weight. Otherwise, it's going to start pulling your roof down.
Right.
So it's like, well, do this, do that, and this is how you get the same results within like 5%.
Right.
And in that extra 5%, you're going to spend $10, $20, $30,000. And is it, at the end of the day, is it going to give you that big of a difference, the end results?
Right. Because the sound going out the floor or the ceiling is less toxic to people usually, right? As opposed to just around.
Right. And in my case, it's more the sound coming in.
Okay.
Like,
fair enough.
especially the roof to ceiling. Like it's to me, it's more the annoyance. Like if there's a dog barking or something, I hear it. And like early on when I hadn't done all this soundproofing, I had like kind of Mickey Mouse did.
Yeah.
There's a bird that I don't hear when I'm recording.
Right.
And then, I have 10 tracks or something and I'm editing and about to send them off and there's a bird.
Yeah.
And I can't take that out. And one time I had a cricket in the room that I didn't hear while I was recording. And it was like a 2-day project. And the next day I came back. So I had to go and recut. And then, of course, that's on me.
Right.
I can't charge anybody for that. So
it's your time. And then how much, so how long when did you build this?
I built this, this particular version maybe 4 years ago.
Okay.
So I've had versions. Like before I converted it into this way and like built the room within a room, I had made what I can or was able to afford at the time. So I've had home studio for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was fine. It was just the fact that I would have to take a lot more time because if there was noise from outside, I would have to pause it for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever.
Yep.
And anybody who has done it, it gets really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar process. I had an old studio in Burbank in my first house, and I built it like, a third of the budget that I used to build this. But I knew when I built this one, I was like, okay, I got to do it right. So I don't have airplanes and dogs and whatever. And for me, so if I need to be out here super late at night, I'm not going to, like, the neighbors are not ever going to know, Right. And that became one of the most important things. Have you spent much time on the room itself inside sound wise?
I did. That was the same kind of thing. Like I talked with a few different engineers, and again, my garage has concrete floor, and I was going to put a nice wooden floor. And I had just done a TV show at Henson B,
right.
And that has the story that I know is that they were remodeling it. Tom Petty was going in to cut his album. Henson was running behind, so the room wasn't finished. And Petty was like, I got to come in. And so they went into a half finished or 3/4 finished room. And it sounded incredible.
Right.
Because it has the concrete floor. And because my room is not that huge, I can get the reflection of like a really hard floor if I need like an aggressive tom or bass tom or something like that type of sound.
Yep.
Or I can put carpets or rugs and be fine. Yep. So I left it. I just put a treatment on it, so it's not just raw concrete.
Right.
And then I got some light baffles that I put on the ceiling.
Okay.
And then I had these, as you can see, the squares, the foam squares.
Yep.
And basically, I just put them up there to see what happens.
Yep.
So and this was I was trying to get my friend who helped me design this, or who gave me advice. I was trying to get him to come out and tune the room,
Yeah.
but he was traveling a lot, and then COVID happened, so we haven't made it happen. But this room sounds fine.
Right.
So as of right now, it was just kind of a lock.
Right. Right.
And I think I'd like to think what I have to do at home is that because it's not that huge, the room sound can be controlled.
Yep. Yeah.
I pretty much when I record is I have a stereo overheads.
Okay.
And I have a Royer SF12, which is the stereo microphone. Ribbon. I use that for either close or I use that for room.
Yeah.
And 95% of the stuff I do, that's it.
Okay. Oh wow.
And of course, depending on what instrument, like if I'm playing congas or something, I'm gonna add maybe 57s or something,
right,
just to have really close one option.
Mm-hmm.
But I rarely have to go past 6 mics, and it would be stereo overhead, stereo ribbon, and then maybe 1 or 2 close mics. Like if I'm doing a concert bass drum or low toms or something like that, I might put something close.
Right.
However, most of the time, what it's for, even like if I'm doing something on the sound stage, scoring stage, it's rare that they put anything like super close for what we do.
Okay.
Because they want that distance more so than
the kind of massive,
insane difference.
Yeah, the massive like
right
superhero thing or whatever. Right.
Yeah, and then if I'm doing toys and shakers and that kind of stuff, it's the same thing. It's then I have the overhead option or the close mic, and because the way the Royer is, it goes both ways. It's a figure 8.
Yep.
And since it's a stereo, so it gets the kind of the back of the room too, mm-hmm. which gives you enough of the 360 image, or is that the term? So far, I don't think anybody has ever complained about early on, of course, there was, I didn't have
learning
and that,
right? Yeah.
But the last few years, there's never been anybody like, hey, I don't like this, or can you change the mic positions, or I like. So it's and I'm the type of person who I'm very obsessive about gear, mm-hmm. but more so instruments. I'm not an engineer. I don't really have a desire of being an engineer. So I want microphones that I can put up and go.
Yeah.
Because versus for like I was listening to your podcast whenever you've been posting them, and usually the drummers talk about I changed the kick drum and I changed this and that, mm-hmm. But you still record the whole drum set. You don't record one thing at a time and then change the pretty much every take I do, I have to change everything.
Very different process. Yeah.
So it's so time consuming already.
Right.
That I'm trying to help myself out by eliminating extra moves, and I try to keep the overheads pretty much in the same place.
Mm-hmm. That's the one on your right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Neumann KM. What is it? KM 184.
Yeah.
KL KM.
KM. Yep.
Yeah, KM 184s. That's and I talked with a lot of people about what to get, and for the money.
Yeah.
Those are for recording percussion. Those are really, really spot on. You could get Sheps, or you can go. But even then, it's is the fact that it's double the money, are you going to hear it, or is it really going to change the difference? And probably at some point I will get more different options.
Sure.
but
Money's
but
going
then
more
again,
toward, more toward instruments at this point, a variety of sound.
right,
Yeah.
right. I think that it more like if something comes back, it's more about, hey, you have a different kind of instrument more so than, hey, instead of Neumann overhead, can
what
you
was that
change
microphone? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I have Millennia preamps.
Okay.
That is, it's super quiet. There's no color and there's no noise. And same thing, I talked with a lot of engineers about that, and I talked to a lot of other percussionists who have home studios. And my understanding is that like a lot of producers and engineers, for example, Neves, they prefer that for album recording because it has a specific character. Film is a little different. And so I don't want to color the sound that somebody can't take off.
You just want clean, precise, and then they can process it
exactly
however they need to.
Because the way I see it is that if we're not going to Sony or Warner's or Capitol or something like that, United, then you already understand that it's going to be a different budget. We're dealing with this, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be as good as possible. But then I'm not going to have 5 or 8 different preamps for you to choose from.
Right.
Unless you really insist, and then the client can send that over.
Right.
But from my perspective, is my money is spent better on instruments, variety of stuff. And then I have Apollo X6 that I got, and I used Apogee for a long time.
Right.
And same thing, I never had any problems. Apogee was a little noisy at times, and then there's little connection problems at times towards the end. But then the Apollo came out, and so it only has 6 channels. That's what I have. Like, I probably will expand it for maybe 2 more channels.
Yeah.
But my room is not that big either. Like after a while, I was like, well,
right.
If I start adding room mics on top of whatever I already have, is like, is it gonna make a difference that cannot be done in post production with the plugins and everything?
Right. Your room's not going to get any bigger or sound any different with more microphones. It's like,
right.
Are you usually moving to the mic, or is the mic coming to the instrument?
I'm usually moving to the mic.
Okay. So you're kind of stationary where that is, and you will, depending on the size of the instrument, obviously you're going to come to that.
Yeah, I to me it's faster to set, like I set the overheads, and if the instrument, if I'm standing and playing, and of course I'll adjust the mics up and down. So
yep.
Depending, like I think I usually try to leave like 3-4 feet between the instrument and the overheads.
Yep.
And then the closed mic, again, it might be a closed mic, or if it's a louder instrument, I'll use it as a room mic, the Royer.
Yep.
And in the same thing, like even then I would plan ahead as okay, so all the instruments that I will need the room mic configuration, I'm going to do them back to back. And then all the instruments that I think I'm going to use close mic with the overheads, I'll do all those. So I don't have to go back and forth and every time adjust the preamps and everything.
So on a particular session, you're going to know, more or less what instruments you're going to use, and you're kind of mapping it out mentally. Like, okay, I'm going to do these things first partly because of the mic configuration, and then do the other things later.
Right. I that's what I usually like. At least a rough plan. Like, and I rarely get any charts. I mean, there's times when I do get very specific charts.
Okay.
But I usually make a plan. Like,
sorry to interrupt. Is this at home? You rarely get charts, or in an actual studio, Warner's? Or
home.
Okay.
If I'm usually like if it's a film or TV, then it's very specific charts. However, there's always the unknown.
Sure.
Like there's times like we were working on Mulan that came out whenever it came out, 2 years ago.
Yep, somewhere 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was funny. There was I think 5 timpani plus 5 or something. Like it was a good sized percussion section. In we had so much gear. We were at Sony, like the whole back row, and it's a huge room. There was gear everywhere, and Brian Kilgore was the principal. And the composer walks in and is like, we have stacks of music and everything is super detailed, and it's like, okay, throw all that out.
Cool.
Okay, let's figure out. Okay, let's hear. Okay, what drums do you have? And he's like, we all played something, and okay, you use that. Okay, let's add something like this. Or where's the? Okay, we need some Chinese higher toms, and
okay, wow.
Then we would take the charts, and we would kind of make an arrangement out of that chart. Okay, you guys, you play the top part, and you guys over there, you play the bass drum part. But it was very much like a living, breathing, creative scenario. But that doesn't happen often. But it's great when it does happen.
Yeah. Do you know why in that particular case the composer did that? Like had it written in the first place?
I think most of the times, my understanding is that there's temp tracks, and then there's the program temp tracks.
Yeah.
So a temp track is something that the director and the producers might use when they're shooting and cutting the movie. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times most of the time they use existing music.
Yep.
And then this is every composer's nightmare scenario when the director gets so married to the temp track, mm-hmm. but it's already existing music from another movie.
Right. And
they're like, well, I want this. So when you start writing, then it either sounds like you copied somebody, right. or it's a sound alike, or you're a copyright infringement, or so my assumption is that in that particular case, there were temp tracks because they shot that movie for like 3 years or something.
Yeah.
So they had existing tracks. Then somebody, composer's assistant or somebody, programmed
right
stuff based on the temp track, so it's similar.
Yep. And
then when we were actually recording, it's like, okay, so let's figure out how this doesn't sound like whatever you get from your sample libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And real quick, like there's a moment 2-3 years ago when all of a sudden we started getting these scores.
Yep.
And there's a few movies we did back to back, and they all had a huge list of instruments. All of a sudden there's a bombo instrument. It was like the tom-tom type of a drum.
Yep.
And we're like, well, this is very battle superhero sounding music. How is it that you think that bombo is going to even fit the sound world, or how you think you can get it to cut through?
Yep.
Because it's going to get buried under bass toms and concert toms and taikos.
Just frequency wave.
Timpani, everything. Frequency and even the attack.
Even attack, okay.
So, and we were all confused because it started, and we would always send a bombo. And the composer wants to hear it, and like, oh, no, let's not use that. Let's pick another instrument. And then I found out that there's a sample library. I asked somebody's assistant, it was like, hey, is there a new library that came out within like a year? And sure enough,
okay,
there was a library that had come out that had bombo in it, but it had nothing to do with the bombo. It was almost like a low timbali versus like mixed with the low concert tom.
Okay,
so it was really aggressive
combined sound for a sample.
but somebody just labeled it as a bombo.
Gotcha. Right.
So we're thinking like, oh, they're exploring some folkloric instruments here, but a lot of not the composers, but their people who work for them, their assistants, they might have no idea what these instruments are in real life. They just have a library and they find something, oh, this sounds good, and they label it bombo because the sample library says bombo.
Right.
And then in our end, it creates this kind of confusion, like, what do you mean? So
yeah.
And a friend of mine, Wade Colbert, who's a great percussionist, he was recording marimba at some session, and the people were coming out of their little, their cubicles. It's like, what is that instrument? Oh, that's marimba. They wrote the score on a keyboard without knowing what marimba is.
Oh, interesting.
So, which is, this is the current reality we live in.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah.
and another friend of mine, he was recording something and he was replacing the samples, and he was playing cabasa, and he got into an argument with them. They're like, "That's not a cabasa," and he's like, "I'm holding a cabasa." They had something else from the sample library.
Right. Just labeled whatever.
So, right. Yeah. So again, sorry, we got sidetracked. But on soundstage, usually there's music that we read.
Yeah.
Home, it's most of the time I get the tracks in, if it's like pop or rock, that kind of music, or like rhythm music.
Yep.
With the rhythm section and stuff. Most of the time I don't, or they might send me a bass chart or something like that.
Okay.
But it's fine, because then it makes it faster for me to say, okay, well, I think they want this, and I'll double check, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What do you want? Do you want me to proceed?
Right.
And I kind of figure out this is going to take, like, let's say they say we have a budget, the 3-hour budget. So this is how much I can do in 3 hours.
Right.
And does it sound good? And then either they say yeah or no, or they have suggestions, or they like, do whatever you want.
Right. You're talking about for film or TV.
Or even, it doesn't, even if it's like an album.
Okay, so an album, you work in a 3-hour block when you're at home. You kind of keep that same principle.
Yeah, it just makes it easier.
Okay.
I mean, if it's an indie project,
right,
and or I'm helping out a friend for, it's a passion project or something, I'm not going to charge them for 3 hours.
Right.
But
in general, do you try to work on that kind of,
well,
the kind of union rates, quote unquote, and also those kind of time blocks? You like to work that way?
Yeah, I mean, for film or TV, then it needs to be, union contract. So that's just how it makes. But if I'm like if it's an album,
mm-hmm.
or somebody's recording and one song or something, then it's more flexible.
Okay.
Like I can help out. So then I was like, well, if you can pay me for 2 hours, 2 hours would be the minimum that I would charge.
Okay.
Because it just, as you know, it takes time to do everything, not just play.
Yeah, I mean, for me, often the most time is actually spent setting up, getting sounds, and then getting the tracks ready to send. And the actual playing time is probably a quarter of that.
Right. And that has been the issue with the when we work from home, and again, like the union scale for film or TV is like it's technically, if you're home, it's a double scale. If you are, technically you are the section leader.
Oh, right. Of course.
But also to help out because you're now the engineer and you're this. So
I didn't realize the union recognized that because I do one union session a year with what I do mainly. You know what I mean? So
right.
I didn't realize that union was actually thinking in those terms now. That's interesting.
Yeah, and during COVID, because everything was so weird, there was an exception made, like you can do regular to the single scale.
Okay.
But it's because it's so time consuming. I prefer not to do that much film or TV from home.
Okay.
Because it gets expensive for the client.
Yeah.
Because every overdub, every double, everything, it adds up.
Yeah.
And so it keeps it easy. Like I did a TV show called Clarice.
Okay.
And we did the whole
Lambs spinoff kind of thing.
It is, yeah, exactly. So we did the whole season in one long day. I think we did like a triple, like 3-hour blocks.
Yep.
And we did it with the audio movers.
Yep.
So the engineer was connected to my computer,
mm-hmm.
and it was a lot faster that way.
Right.
But it still takes time for me to make any adjustments and everything. So, again, if I do stuff, film or TV from home, and it needs to be on the contract,
mm-hmm.
It's obviously then it is a 3-hour block.
Right.
That's what it has to be.
Right.
If I'm doing somebody's passion project, I'll do an hour or two.
Right.
But so then to make that go smoother and faster, I map out a plan. Like, okay, let me do all the shakers and tambourine and this and that first, and then I'll look. And sometimes if it's 2 or 3 songs, I might do like all 3 songs, all these instruments first, and then come back to conga drums or bongos or something for all 3 songs.
Right.
So I don't have to move the microphones around that much.
Right. Okay. Keep your engineering to a minimum. Yeah.
Right. And I did another project during COVID. It was challenging because there's a lot of cues in every cue had 6 to 8 passes. And they all went from little toys, shakers to all the big drums.
Right.
So I think I did 1 cue at a time because there were so many cues and there was charts were very detailed and there were little tempo changes and everything.
Yeah.
It probably would have taken me longer to do it the other way because if 20 cues later I can't come back to the first one, I'm starting from scratch. I don't remember what the cue was anymore.
Right.
And if I have to do that 5-6 times in a row,
yep.
I'm going to be so confused by the end of the day.
Right.
But it took a long time to do that.
So in that case, are you on Pro Tools or Logic, or what are you running?
Mainly Logic, but I do use Pro Tools.
Okay, so in that case, where you're being asked to do something with tempo changes and things like that, are you being sent the session with that all mapped out already, and then you're sending the session and the audio files back for each particular one?
Yeah, then I just send the whole session back.
Right.
So
okay.
I don't even export the audio. I just send the whole session back.
Okay, right. So literally you could do 1 cue at a time or 1 instrument almost at a time and then send it off or batch send it
Technically,
off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think usually, I would do 3 hours or 6 hours or 9 hours.
Yeah.
And then send everything that I did.
Right.
I did that day, and then the next day I do the same.
Yep.
And that obviously makes it so much faster if I have, what? Sorry, I'll take it back. If they send a charted, like tempo changes and everything, that makes it faster. However, they don't know how to label the instrument, so I still have to go through all that. And then I have to figure out how am I going to label the instruments so they understand what is happening.
Like room versus close and or
Yeah, and if it's a medium shaker versus low shaker versus, because that too, like, it's, I think it takes a little longer, but if I do, let's say I do a pop song and they want a shaker or tambourine, I'm going to give them two. I'm going to give two different options for shakers. I'm going to give them two options for tambourines.
just sonically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not necessarily always for tambourines, but at least for shakers.
Yep. Okay.
And it's faster for me to play the song twice. Let's say it's a 4-minute song.
Yep.
Instead of sending in and they're like, do you have another shaker? I have to go back and do it again and then send it. So I'd rather waste that time, not waste, but use the time in that moment.
Understood. Yep.
And also, like, if I'm doing conga pass, a lot of times I do two passes. I do one that's just more or less 95% solid time. And then I do another pass that, it's moves around a little bit more.
Okay.
And, there's maybe little fills and the little action in, so then they can chop it up however they want it.
Yeah.
But the same thing, like, I don't want to have to go back and like, oh, the conga track is too busy. Can you pull it? Can you tone it down, or vice versa? Like, oh, it would have been so great to have more.
Right. That's interesting. It's interesting. The percussion world versus like full drum kit world is so interesting because in a certain way, the drum kit world, you possibly doing, 10, 12, 14 mics at a time. So you have all that and you've kind of made all these sonic choices and you're going to give a couple passes. But in your world, it's different because it's almost easier to give some options. But at the same time, when you start layering more percussion, it becomes more complicated faster because you have multiple mics on each instrument. And
absolutely.
I was talking about this with MB Gordy, and it was like, for me, sometimes I'm like I've done a little bit of that here. You know what I mean? And like immediately it gets complicated fast. Like you're sensing growth. Like, you could be running like 36 tracks with just a few instruments.
Right.
Yeah.
And even then, like, okay, so which it's in a way, it's like, I know you've talked about this with other guests before. It's like when you're home, you have the luxury of experimenting. You can try different things because you're not on somebody else's dime per se. Like, I can take 5 or 10 minutes just to try something out that I would not charge the client for.
Right.
I can't do that if we're in the studio, because we can, but a lot of times there's not that luxury.
Right.
So it's creatively, it's very fun. And like, I can buy wacky instruments and it's like, oh, I know exactly how to make this work if I have time to mix it in and let the client hear it. But sometimes in the room with a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's not going to work. Let's move on. So you can't start the conversation like, well, but if we record it like this, and they're like, oh, this is $100 or $200 a minute. Come on, we gotta move.
Fuck up. Let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but absolutely, like sonically, like how much low end you're recording, how much mid range you're recording, how much high end you're recording, and then are they at some point they're gonna start canceling each other out?
Yeah. So how are you dealing with? I don't want to cut you off on that point, but how are you dealing with like low end in your room and also size of the room just with certain projects where if you're doing it at home, but it needs to be like super big and a lot of low end and things, how are you working with that stuff?
There's two main things or three, I think. One is that the drums cannot be too big. Like even a concert bass drum, I think maybe 32 still works in this room, but I would never bring a 36. because it just there's no space for that sound.
Sure.
Most of the time, I have a little 26-inch
Okay.
old Ludwig with calf heads,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't play that loud.
Right.
So playing a little softer, I put, and the third thing is like I do close mic the bass drum.
Okay.
And I don't know if I do it from the playing head better or the reso head.
Yep.
I don't have a system. I'm almost like a kind of like a dog chasing a car. Like I literally like I live in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I hear the track and it tells me something, or I get inspired or something.
Right.
And I'm like, this might sound cool, and I'll try that. And so I don't have a specific system. Like this is where I put the bass drum. This is how I mount it. This is how I mic.
Right.
I'm so not that guy.
Right.
In because I focus on the music side and the playing side and all that stuff so much more.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's my personality.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that I think like, and I might EQ it a little bit. Sure. Again, all the tracks I sent out are 98% raw.
Okay. Right.
I do a little bit of adjustments. Like if there's a weird frequency, I might, boost the low end a little or cut something high end or something, but it's very minimal.
Yeah.
On every instrument. And usually like most of the toys and shakers, and I don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Like I figure out like, okay, if I have the overheads here and the close mic here, and that's why I like the combination of ribbon and the Neumanns, is because the ribbon is so warm sounding anyway.
Uh-huh.
And for percussion, it sounds great. The triangles, everything like that, it cuts the harshness off automatically.
Okay.
But if you want that brightness, then the Neumanns are, or whatever overheads I'm using, that's going to capture it.
Yeah.
So that is one thing where I do make sure that it's controlled and then mirroring with the track that it sounds.
Yep.
Something like it fits.
Right.
And again, like if somebody wants me to play taiko at home, I can't bring big taikos because it would just kill the room.
There's no room.
And it starts sounding smaller. So sometimes I might have to cheat and use another taiko sounding drum just to give the effect of the tech. And I play with mallets and sticks a lot.
Yep.
Like, because usually taikos are played with, it's just a wooden bat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I might have something that has a little bit of
like material, like a different
like felt, or like a hard felt bass drum mallet, or even like medium. But sometimes I end up using like marimba mallets or something. It just depends what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if I'm doing 2 or 3 passes. And another thing that I do is, let's say I do 4 passes of taiko.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same rhythm. I would always, at least 2 of the takes would be different type of stick.
Sure. Okay. Because you're layering.
Yeah, because I'm not going to have 4 taikos in my room.
Right.
So if I have 2 different drums,
right,
I would do one pass with one stick.
Yeah.
And then another pass with another stick, and I might have to put something on the head to change the sound. And a lot of times I do one pass leading with right hand, another pass leading with left hand.
Interesting. So you're sounding like a section.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very right hand strong player.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when I do it with left hand, it's automatically going to be, little
off, but in a good way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I do move the drums around. Like in that case, I would not use it. I would move the drum in the room.
Okay.
So you get at least a little bit of difference in the.
Yeah.
So that's, a little cheat, if not, like a bad cheat, but in a way to start the project.
Do you find that, like, I would imagine you're one of the younger guys in the film world doing this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's guys that have been around a long time that never really were working at home, I'm guessing. Do you find that, like, your experience of doing this stuff at home and having to figure out these types of solutions, number one, do they carry over into big sound stages? And number two, do you feel like it gives you, like, a bit of an advantage at all?
Good question.
Or maybe just a stand up sense of, like, maturity, musical maturity, because you have to understand these things at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely carries over in the sense of me having more a variety of tricks, or like, hey, this drum doesn't look much, but if we do this, you're gonna like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a good concept that comes out or develops, especially when you're layering tracks. It's like, well, if you do it this way, it's going to be an overkill. So why don't you do this, 2 or 3 drums like this, and then add something else on top of that, like metal chairs or plastic buckets or something that gives you still get the rhythm, but it gives you a completely different sonic frequency.
Mm-hmm.
However, not to say that these haven't been done in the film world before, because I'm sure everything has been tried out.
Sure.
So it's not like I'm reinventing and I'm like an innovator here.
Sure.
But it does speed up your thinking process when you hit a spot where nobody knows what to do, or the composer is like, oh, this doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a question mark. So then you have ideas that you can like, okay, let's try this. Mm-hmm. However, you have to be very careful that you don't open up a Pandora's box. It's like then the whole project or the composer or the crew gets sidetracked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really because if it's a section, there's a principal percussionist.
Yeah.
Who's basically he or she sends, or they send the instruments.
Mm-hmm.
They assign the parts, who's going to play what.
Okay.
In the norm, the tradition is that if there's dialogue, ideas are bounced back and forth, we always go through the principal player.
Okay. There's a it's
a
step on people's feet.
Yeah. But there's a reason for that. It's like, obviously, you need to respect the principal player's relationship, because usually they have a relationship with the composer, okay, or at least, the contractor. So you don't want to step all over that. Okay. But also, once everybody starts spewing out ideas, because everybody has ideas, then everybody's going to get confused.
Yeah.
And nobody knows what's going on. And it slows the process down so much.
Okay.
So the best way to do is that, like, even if I have a great idea, or I'm seeing the Titanic going down, I'm like, oh, I know how to save this right now.
Right.
But so I would still go and carefully whisper, like, hey, this might work.
Right.
Or you want to try that. But even there, you got to be careful. Like, everybody has ideas. You don't want to be like, hey, check me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and people have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And they might know, most of the time they know something that you don't.
Right. Which is an interesting thing too. You're like, well, this guy's been around a long time. He's seen a lot of things also. Right.
And there's like a colleague, Dan Greco, who's had an incredible career, and he's he's been the principal for Michael Giacchino for many years now.
Okay.
And he's very low key. He's very mellow. He's really nice and a caring and helping person. Mm-hmm. But he's been doing this for 40, 50 years. And he's seen everybody come and go. And so the wealth of knowledge that person has, but the understanding of how many ideas you start throwing around in any given moment.
Right.
All those things are so valuable because you're starting to waste a lot of time.
Yeah.
When you start like, hey, let's try this. Hey, let's try that. Oh, well, this could be cool.
Yeah.
And so you have to, as a principal person, you have to be really good at editing the players in your section, and also the engineer and the composer and the orchestrator. So you're basically like the quarterback of the whole session.
Yeah.
And if there's a problem, you know what to do immediately.
Yeah.
And there's a long list of incredible players in this town, but there's a short list of incredible section leaders. But for some reason, the guys who were the section leaders, they were so good at solving those problems that nobody saw that were coming. Mm-hmm. And that is really, like, ultimately, you always want to save money for whoever is paying.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you save money by not getting paid yourself.
Right.
But you want to make sure that they have a specific timeline. This much has to happen within that time period.
Yeah. Who's
the guy who can make it happen?
Yeah.
And why?
The more you make people look good, save them money, the more you'll work and therefore make more.
Exactly. Right. And the same thing, like if you're a younger player and you start getting into this world, it's like same thing. How much faster and easier you make the principal player's job.
Right. Less hassle you make. The more you
right.
And maybe the more you shut up, the better, and just do what's told, and then you nail it. That's
absolutely
better than spitting out an idea and derailing something or being ego strong about something.
Absolutely. And for the longest time, I kept reading Modern Drummer articles that they're like, studio guys are like, oh, you have to leave the ego when you get in the room, and the ego has to stay out. And like, I never understood. Like, I thought I understood what it means, but it really is that you're there you're a craftsperson. Mm-hmm. You're there to do somebody's project. Mm-hmm. This is not your project. If you want, start your own band, like they say.
Right.
So you need to figure out what your role is.
Yep.
And if I'm in a room, whatever we're doing, Spider-Man or something, that and I'm playing bass drum, and there's all this other cool percussion stuff happening, and I'm stuck playing the bass drum, it might sting for a second.
Sure.
But then my approach is like, you know what? I'm going to play this bass drum so good that nobody has ever played the bass drum better in this room, which is not true, but that's what that has to be my approach.
Yeah.
To get into it, and then to make the music sound the best, and because somebody has to play that bass.
Yeah.
Like, they might be cool snare parts or mallet parts or something, and everybody's like, oh, I want to play that.
Yeah.
But there's also the bass drum or the suspended cymbal and something, and I love doing those parts for that reason, is that they're really important. And I know for a fact that there was a film early on in my career in that world where I got called to do one day for another movie, and all I did 95% of the day I played bass drum. Mm-hmm. And the same composer and the same engineer had another huge movie coming up in like 2 weeks, and just the way I played the bass drum they called me. I got hired to do the whole movie because they're like, oh, and it was mostly like whole notes every 4 bars.
Okay.
But where I positioned the hit with the orchestra, they're like, oh, that's the spot that we need that guy.
Oh,
and
wow.
and it's not because I was like, oh, I'm so great. It was just like the weirdest things can change your career. Like
Oh, no,
it
it could have been, it's first of all, attention to detail, getting a good sound, good attitude. You know, you sat there and
right.
you did your job and you read the chart and they were like, hey man, this guy's like nailing it. Let's get this dude because it's
Right.
free.
So yeah. And but to me that goes for no matter what are you doing.
Sure.
And so like don't look down on any gig or any part you're doing. And I've done horrible gigs in my life. I mean like being on stage thinking like, how did I get myself into this?
We've all been there. Yes.
Right. But to me, that is part of the whole journey. Like we have to go through that. And I was, first of all, I always rather play music than do something else.
Sure.
And then I was always, I'm going to learn something out of this gig. I'm going to focus on something and I'm going to play this gig as good as I can. And that has been one of the bigger learning experiences to me is that whatever the job is, I'm like, I'm going to play this so well. I'm going to push myself. And it doesn't mean that it was somehow exceptional in any other way, that it's just the process happened in my head and we're creatures of our habits. So then I'm training my brain to push myself to that place every time I play music. So like it's really hard for me to like grab a drum and just kind of not play. Like I'd rather not play the drum. And this, I'm not putting a drum circle down as a
concept,
a topic concept in any way. So please, whoever is listening or watching. But for me, it would be hard to go to a drum circle and just play like, you know, like fake it. So if I was doing a drum circle, I would then try to play as good as I can and then inspire people hopefully around me and like get something else out of it, which might turn into you know, if somebody's leading the drum circle, they might take it the wrong way.
Right.
So, but for me to like kind of like jam in a loose term, it's difficult.
Okay.
Like I rather than we go full out or don't play.
Something that's maybe has more purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
But to me, like I know there's a culture right now where because of social media and the current world we live in is that players, and not just drummers or percussionists, but in any instrument, they're like promoting themselves as like, I'm a studio player, I'm so and so and such and such, without having any type of career. Like they just decided that, oh, I'm gonna buy some mics and now I'm a studio drummer or I'm a studio guitar player. And to me, you have to have a career. You have to play club dates and you have to do tours or concert. Like you have to have an experience where you can draw from to do studio work.
Yep.
And you and Brendan, you were talking about you know, how do you recreate Bonham stuff and like how deep you can go into that stuff.
Right.
And how deep you get into miking it and what kind of gear preamps and all that stuff was used to get that. But also, if somebody wants you to play like Bonham, do you understand the placement of his feel, like where he would put the kick drum and the snare, or like, oh, what did Jeff Porcaro do, or like all these great players. Why do they sound, or why did they work so much?
Yeah.
And so what do you do with the, like somebody says, oh, can you pull the snare back a little bit? Or do they even have to tell you that because you hear the song and you automatically know, oh, this is where it's going to feel the best?
Yeah.
And that, to me, it's not possible to have that insight unless you work as a musician.
Oh yeah.
For years and played in bands and played without the click track and recording without the click track and hearing that back and it's be funny. Like, oh,
we had an interesting conversation about this a couple of years ago. Actually, this subject that you're
right.
Yeah. I just remembered.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. But that's the thing. Like, can you play without a click track?
Right.
And even if you do play with the click track, how solid? Like, are you really always there? Like, I do. I mean, I played on this big band album not that long ago. I was doing overdubs, and everybody's great. I mean, top notch. And so I was doing a shaker track, and there was some movement in the drum track, and I was like, well, I can't play shaker over those two bars because it's going to highlight the fluctuation, and I'm not going to be able to do that with the shaker because then it would sound really horrible.
Yeah, because
I had to figure.
Yeah, if you hear the shaker moving with the time as opposed to having space, right, or the density of the
right,
rhythm, right? Yeah.
So, but if I played 16s all the way over those two bars, then it would also highlight the fluctuation in the drum track. But if you heard the track without the shaker, it didn't sound bad at all. It sounded normal. So it was just because there was something mirroring against.
Yep. I literally have to do something when we finish. I'm working on a track that I did yesterday, and I got it, basically got it approved, but I did it without the click because it's moving, and the artist asked for like a few more fills, but I got to go talk to the producer and be like, look, it moves too much, and the more I put in there, the worse it's going to sound because just the way it is right now, I'm just moving with the acoustic guitar, and it feels pretty normal, but like any more subdivision in there and it sounds wacky. Like right now it's going with the vocal and it's cool. It's super vibey, but I mean, that's an amazing insight of like, like space versus density. And if there are minor fluctuations in there, playing less is helpful, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that too becomes like when you do, what I found is when I record more and more at home, because you're so like laser focused on just what you do, and you can detail, you can get in, one beat or bar at a time, is that then obviously I've come up with ideas like, okay, well, let me do something else here, okay, without embarrassing anybody. Because I can't be in a room and say, oh, so-and-so is the drummer, he sucks, those two bars are horrible, we can't do it. I mean...
Right. You can't.
No.
Yeah.
And why would I? And it's going to happen the same way. Like, I know I'm going to play something and somebody else is going to come like, what the hell is that? But point is that then what do you do in that moment? How do you solve the problem for them without really saying that it's a problem?
Right.
And also because we live in such quantized world, everything is so quantized.
Yeah.
Whatever you hear, so our ears have been tuned into, like, if you hear something without a click, everyone's like,
something's wrong. Yeah.
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 So, but going back to the whole, in my opinion, is like, if you don't have an extensive career of experience, then that's what do you need to be a studio musician? You have to have an experience of playing music and playing in bands and grooving, like really grooving. It's like anybody can learn tumbao and congas and martillo and everything. But if they want you to put on a specific feel to it,
actual feel, yeah.
So is it going to be an R&B thing, or is it going to be, some poppy, or is it going to be really like Cuban based? Like all these, they have such a different feeling where you put the, are you a little pushing it a little bit? Are you way behind? All that stuff. How much stuff you play in between.
Yep.
And you're not going to know or get that until you work with great drummers and or great bass players. And we all know that when, you play with guys and they turn around like, dude, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And you have no idea what are you doing, but it's not right.
Right. Or they turn around and smile.
Even better. Especially when the singer turns around and smiles. That's what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I think it's my because I love soundtracks. I've always loved soundtracks. I've always loved the idea of being a studio musician, and I did a lot of touring for 20 years before it's not that I recorded this whole time. I started doing sessions when I was 16.
Right.
Low budget, low key sessions.
Experience. Yeah.
So I had a lot of album recording experience before I started getting film calls, and which helped me to be comfortable in the studio, the click and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Of course, film calls have their own problems and things that make it really scary. But also because I played so much with musicians, with great drummers and great bands and stuff that I know that I don't have to be concerned. Am I going to be able to find the groove or fit in the pocket?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I kind of feel that is getting lost right now because people can buy a recording set and they can quantize. Like a younger player I know, he once told me, he's like, I would never record shaker more than 8 bars because then I'll just loop it and it's done. So
yeah.
Then why even do the 8 bars? Why just do one shot and
yeah. Right. Yeah.
But to me,
you're wasting time by doing all 8 bars.
Right. And I was listening to like Rocky 2 soundtrack the other day, and I know Steve Schaefer played drum set, and Bob Samiti, who was a great not retired percussionist, he was in the section, and I'm sure it was Emil, Richard, and probably Joe and everybody. But it's dated. But the playing is amazing, and like the concept of all that stuff, it's so important, and I am, hopefully we don't lose that.
Yeah,
we don't lose the concept, and just talking about recording, there's specific instruments that record great. There might be a specific snare drum that just sounds great and nobody knows why. Or I'm sure you have something like, oh, this hi-hats, I can use them pretty much almost every time.
Yep.
And then you buy another pair of the same thing and it doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have the magic or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And but I know cymbals, like in a microphone, it likes different mics, of course, but microphones like high-end. So if you record super dark cymbals, you can't make it brighter. Right. You can dull it out if needed, but like Heisty, for example, I've always, without even knowing it, I've always loved that particular sound. But film too, it needs, a lot of times it's used to uplift something.
Right.
And it's funny because a lot of the section work in the film world is similar to being in an orchestra. And majority of orchestra musicians are like, oh, you have to have this super dark old case for Piatti, and oh, you have to have this snare drum with super dry cable snares and everything. because that is going to pierce through it, and that's the sound. But when you record, when you deal with the microphone and the room and all that stuff, and even the purpose of the music, it's a completely different animal. So to understand why specific type of snare drum sounds great, or why specific cymbals sound great, or bass drums sound great, and you might, even if it says fortissimo on bass drum, you might have to play bits of piano because you get the low end
according to the section. Oh, right. Of course. Yeah. All those things according to the section,
right?
The room, according to, not necessarily hitting the shit out of something,
right? Because you're just gonna choke, and it's gonna bleed through every mic, and then they're screwed later.
Yeah.
And like I've been obsessed about snare drums the last couple of years, and especially for some reason piccolo snare drum. Like, and there's a couple of drums that I know that I love that sound in my head, but they're old drums.
Which are they?
So there's I don't even know who made it. A friend of mine, Steve Schaefer, he has this piccolo that it's a custom. Somebody made it probably in the 50s or 60s.
Okay.
And then he has a 4x14 a Ludwig.
Okay.
And there's just something magical about those two drums. And I've been on this mission, and not just those two drums, but there's, a few other drums, and I've been trying to figure out how am I going to get that particular sound. And it's difficult because modern snare wires and heads and everything is different.
Yeah.
But to me, it is that important for me to find and keep that sound alive and going.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I don't have other drums, but I want to have whatever I hear in my head, I want to be able to have it. It's just something that I can't just go online and order.
It's an interesting thing. I think that you're touching on it, and I think it has to do with style, really. And like with like what a lot of people who work in studio worlds, they can be maybe accused of not having style because they're so adaptable or chameleon-like to be able to do a lot of different types of things. But in reality, there is something in particular that you hear. There are things that you hear that are really connect with you, sonically or whatever. And you're trying to put those things back out into the world, that like your sense of sound, obviously musicality, things like that. So your sense of style is being put into, whatever project you're working on.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
in the most musical way, not by forcing it, but
absolutely,
but understanding the sonic choice,
Absolutely. And that's been, it's been another thing. Like I've talked with many people over the years about this, and they're like, you have this amazing drum, or you have this amazing cymbal, or whatever it is, and you play it, or let's say you have an amazing drum set and you're so in love with it, and after 4 bars they stop. It's like, oh, that sounds horrible.
Right.
You have something else, and your back vocal is like, no, but this sounds the best. You don't understand. But I've always been.
I try to say that to every client that comes in. I say, you don't understand. This is the best, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it really works. Yeah.
Yeah, and 6 bars later.
Next. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But I've always been like, look, I'm here to get you what you want.
Yeah.
I want you to get excited because you're getting what you want.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, for a percussionist, buying a lot of sticks and mallets and things to hit and making your own, and like all that stuff is so important, because you, at some point, you're gonna run out of the instruments. But then if you have 5 or 8 different variations of things to play it with, even your hands and whatever, all of a sudden you expanded the whole range of what you can get out of these instruments and experiment like, well, what if I take this spiral cymbal and I put it here on top of a low taiko drum or whatever you're doing. But I always I never get offended if somebody's like, oh, that drum sounds bad.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't mean that drum sounds bad per se. It just means that wherever we're trying to put it, it doesn't work.
It's not right in this, this moment. Yeah.
It's your snare sounds like shit. that comment, but
because you know that it doesn't. In reality,
exactly.
It doesn't sound like shit. It's just not the right thing for this song.
And so I'm never offended. And we were doing concert toms once for something, and a composer was totally shitting on how they sounded.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's fine. It's next week somebody's gonna love these drums.
Right.
So it's not, let's try another set of let's take the single-headed toms, and then he loves those. It's just a sonical whatever, and their expression might be harsh, or they might not think that, oh, this is your precious drum.
Right.
They're like, oh, I hate it.
Right.
Never used
on
that
eBay
one
for 4 years for this thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I never take any of that kind of stuff personally. I just want you to be so happy that you call me back because I made you happy.
Right.
And I was able to give you what you need and get you excited and hopefully offer something that you didn't even think that you were looking for.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yes, all that stuff is like no matter how much I love a particular instrument, once I hear the music, it's like, well, I know it's not going to fit, so don't even try. You still always have to serve the music, and once you record it, it's there. You can't take it out. So it's different than playing live. You can, a lot of stuff. Who cares?
Right.
Not that who cares, but I'm saying it happens in a moment. If it wasn't the right sound, okay, nobody died.
Different mentality. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I think I go through different phases. I get super obsessed over a particular instrument or a particular style of music or something. And then I buy a lot of gear and I find whatever I end up really liking or needing. And then I sell the stuff that I don't necessarily like. For conga drums was my first thing. And Paulinho and Paulino da Costa and Luis Conte and Lenny Castro were the first guys that I ever heard. Mm-hmm. And I came here because Luis and Lenny lived in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And well, so does Paulinho, but Luis and Lenny were working outside the studios a lot more than Paulino does. And to even figure out the congas they used, what was in it still is, it's taken me a long time to find out why their drums sound the way they do when they record.
Yep. And
when they were made, what kind of head was the bearing heads, and you can go so deep down into that rabbit hole. And the conga heads are 30 years old, so it's good. Of course, the Roja is going to have a specific sound versus brand new.
Yeah.
And but I go through obsessive, in a healthy way, but I do go down the rabbit hole. Like, well, I need to figure out how am I going to get this sound, because this is the sound I want to put out there.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I keep coming back to this, but your side of what you do as a percussionist and what I do, and how similar but different they are, but those obsessive things about what is that thing? What is that sound? How do you get that? And in a way it's exactly the same in a way it's not. But I guess in my mind, I wouldn't like from since I'm not as deep in like film music as you, I wouldn't think that you or people that are doing film music would be thinking as much like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But in reality, it's really the same. It's like, what is that snare on that record? Or how did that guy tune that, or guy, gal, whatever, tune that drum or whatever? It's the same sonic obsession, regardless of the jobs that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've spent so much time, so much money on trying to get what I wanted and needed. And then actually during the COVID, I ended up inheriting a large collection of somebody who retired.
Mm-hmm.
And that made a lot of things easier for me because I know that I've heard those instruments 1,000 times.
Mm.
So now I have those instruments.
Oh, wow. Literal.
Literally.
Yeah.
And also like I studied with Don Williams, who's a incredible percussionist and timpanist in town. When he was a couple of years ago, he mainly plays timpani these days, so he was selling a lot of his percussion instruments away. Like I was able to get a couple of instruments from him, like a set of orchestra bells and a bass drum that have been around since, I don't know, 40s, 50s, because his dad, John Williams Sr., was an incredible drummer who did a lot of studio work. And this is John Williams' dad.
Okay.
So those instruments are part of Hollywood history.
Cool.
So now to have those actual specific instruments, not just trying to find the similar instrument. But of course, 20, 30 years later, like taken this long for me to get the instruments that I wanted.
That's interesting. Super cool.
Yeah. And I really, to me, all this history is really important. And the fact that they will continue to get recorded.
Right.
Instead of they end up in the school orchestra or
right.
somewhere where they get destroyed. Like I want to make sure that this tradition, this sound, because Hollywood has a very specific sound.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that it lives on, and the instruments that were recorded, they still stay in town and they will be recorded.
Right.
I
think that's the perfect point to wrap up on, man.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty awesome, dude. Right. That's like, literally continuing the legacy, sonic legacy.
It's you're doing that same thing, knowing or not, but you're like how to really tune the snare drums and how to get these very detailed things because they're part of the history, instead of like, oh, it's a snare drum and this is how it came out.
Right. Or throw a bunch of towels on it because you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then try to EQ it after.
Yeah. Right.
And then you end up, well, let's drop it down an octave and like all that stuff. Like,
right. Right.
And to me, that knowledge and because it all contributes into the recording process. It's going to inspire you play differently, and it, like in my how I believe it is, like everything affects everything.
Right. It does. Yeah. Yeah. Things build off each other, and then those little bits of palette end up creating the whole piece of art.
Yeah.
If you drop your neon green paint in the middle of it accidentally, the whole thing could be screwed.
Right. And then I was gonna say, like, I've been writing this like actually composing jingles for a buddy of mine who has a jingle company, and actually I think a couple have been used on commercials.
Nice.
But it's been a really weird experience of recording, trying to create a minute and a half percussion pieces that
Mm.
nobody can really pinpoint the origins of any instrument.
It's funny. I'm doing some similar things, but not necessarily commercially.
Right.
Just
But the journey of like how to sound like nothing.
right.
Like
Right.
it has to sound
Like, what is
like
that? Yeah. Who knows?
exactly.
Yeah.
But you do it once or twice, it's easy. But when you have to do it 20 times or 50 times, it gets really challenging.
Yeah. Right. Because your creativity, you got to dig. You got to dig.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but I usually program drums, or at least a kick drum.
Mhm.
I might do hi hat and snare
Right.
by themselves,
Yeah.
and have kick from machine or somewhere wherever. Because I'm not really set up to record drum set, and I don't have different kick drums and all that. But it's the sonic choice that you make when I choose a kick drum sound.
Oh yeah.
Then I mean, yeah, I could go I can change it because it's programmed.
Yeah.
But I don't. I never, like, once I make the decision, this is what it is.
You're building the palette from there.
Yeah. And that one sound affects so much. Like, it's, as you know, like, it can ruin the whole thing if it's it can sound really weird.
Sometimes I hear a recording and I that's what I hone in on, a ride cymbal or a kick drum sound. And I'm like, oh, why? You know,
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
So, dude, I gotta jump. I'm sorry. I feel like
no worries.
I actually have like many more questions for you, but in reality, I have to run.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So hopefully there's something usable.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is, except those 3 minutes in there, 2 minutes that. So yeah, but man, maybe after all this bullshit is dying down, I'll come by and just hang in. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's
Sounds
good.
Awesome,
little man.
Great to see you.
Yeah,
and great. You guys stay safe and healthy.
Likewise, dude.
All right. Yeah,
All right, Pete.
be safe.
See you, man.
Talk soon.
Take it easy.
Go.